There's a moment on the twin flame journey that feels almost like a storm quietly passing through the soul. It's subtle at first, a shift, a tug, a whisper from deep within. The divine feminine, often the more spiritually awakened one in the early stages, begins to feel the pull inward, not away from her twin flame, but toward herself. This is not abandonment. It is not punishment. It is not some clever manipulation. It is a sacred return to the self, a remembering. And when she begins to walk this inner path, something unexplainable starts to stir within the divine masculine. Something ancient. Something wild. Obsession is not even the right word. It's more like a sacred fire igniting in his soul, a magnetic longing, a fierce desire to close the gap he once thought he could live with. But let's slow down and understand this truth deeply. Because there is power here. There is liberation. There is transformation waiting to unfold for both. To understand why the divine masculine becomes more intensely drawn to the divine feminine when she becomes unavailable, we must first understand what that unavailability actually means. For the divine feminine, this withdrawal is not a cold retreat. It's not done out of bitterness or anger. It is a conscious decision to return to the source of her own power. It's a moment in time when she realizes she has spent too long pouring from an empty cup. She sees now that chasing, waiting, hoping, overgiving, it only left her depleted, scattered, disconnected from her own sacred essence. This unavailability is emotional, energetic, spiritual. It's not about ignoring him or playing games. It's about closing the door gently, turning off the noise, and listening, finally listening to the quiet voice of her own soul. For so long, she gave everything: her presence, her forgiveness, her nurturing, her light. And now, she returns to those gifts not to give them away, but to nourish herself. This phase often comes after great pain, perhaps after being met with silence, rejection, or confusion from her twin. And rather than fighting harder to be seen, she begins to understand the divine paradox. The more she runs toward him, the more he runs from her. But the moment she turns toward herself, he begins to feel her absence, not just in the physical sense, but in the energetic field they both share. This is a powerful moment, because the divine feminine is not disappearing, she is rising. And in that rising, she no longer becomes a source of light only for him. She becomes a sun unto herself. She learns to generate joy from within. She dives into her passions. She anchors herself in daily rituals. She cultivates her inner peace. And slowly, the longing that once tormented her begins to dissolve, replaced by a radiant sense of purpose. And that right there is the shift that awakens the masculine's obsession, not because she's playing hard to get, but because her energy is no longer bleeding outward. It is whole, sovereign, undeniably magnetic. Energetically, the twin flame bond exists in a constant state of exchange. It is not linear, it is not always equal, but it is always alive. And when the divine feminine pours all her energy into the masculine, he becomes used to her presence. It's like a song playing in the background, beautiful, comforting, but unnoticed after a while. When that music stops, the silence is deafening. He may not understand it right away. He may not even consciously register the change. But something within him stirs. The connection that once felt so predictable now feels distant. And in that distance, he begins to crave her energy. Not just her physical presence, but her essence. The light she carried, the warmth she exuded, the way she held the space without asking for anything in return. Suddenly, he is faced with the absence of that. And this is where his inner obsession begins. It is important to understand that the divine masculine often does not awaken in the same way or at the same time as the feminine. His journey is usually one of slow realization. He tends to be more mentally anchored, more guarded, more conditioned by societal expectations. So when she was available, loving, open, present, he may not have been able to fully receive her. He may have run, he may have shut down, he may have denied his own feelings. But when she pulls away, not out of anger, but with sacred intention, it triggers his spiritual discomfort. It awakens his soul's memory. It reminds him of something he never knew he forgot, that her presence was never ordinary, that what they share cannot be found elsewhere, that there is a void now, and only her energy can fill it. This is not about ego-driven attachment. It's deeper than that. His obsession is rooted in a soul knowing, a recognition, a calling, The divine feminine, by retreating into her own sacred cave, has become the mirror he can no longer look away from, and now he must himself. Energetic sovereignty is one of the most misunderstood, yet transformative aspects of the twin flame path. It is the art of owning your energy, of standing in your light without giving it away to be validated, seen, or loved. When the divine feminine steps into this space, everything shifts. She no longer begs for crumbs of affection. She stops checking her phone. She releases timelines. She no longer waits in the shadows for him to return. Instead, she begins creating the life she used to postpone. She fills her days with meaning. She becomes her own sanctuary. And in doing so, she doesn't just detach, she reclaims. This is the energy the divine masculine finds impossible to ignore, because for the first time, she is no longer asking for love. She is becoming love. She is no longer seeking peace from him. She is embodying it. Her very essence begins to vibrate at a frequency that no longer needs to prove her worth. And that frequency is what draws him in. It's easy to misunderstand this phase as being heartless or detached, but in truth, it is the deepest form of self-love. She is no longer shrinking to make others comfortable. She is expanding to meet her own soul. When the divine feminine is energetically sovereign, she is deeply rooted, not easily shaken, not swayed by temporary emotions. She knows who she is, and she honors her intuition above all else. She listens when her soul says rest. She moves when her spirit says go. She creates boundaries without guilt. She communicates with clarity. She radiates without apology. And in this state, she becomes profoundly magnetic. The divine masculine senses this. It is not something he sees. It is something he feels. Her light no longer chases him. It calls him, not with desperation, but with divinity. This is the obsession, not of control, but of awakening. He is obsessed because he finally sees her for who she is, not someone who needs him, but someone his soul can no longer live without. He might pretend he doesn't care or act indifferent, but nothing brings him peace. Nothing fills the gap. Because that gap is not just about her, it's about a part of himself that has long been buried beneath layers of fear, pride, and avoidance. Her absence doesn't simply make him miss her. It makes him confront himself. Without her nurturing energy surrounding him, he begins to feel his own unresolved wounds rise to the surface. This discomfort is not a punishment. It's a mirror. Her silence shows him all the places where he has not yet learned to hold himself. All the emotions he pushed away now come forward. All the truths he avoided begin to echo louder. And in that stillness, something sacred begins to awaken. At first, it's small, just a flicker of awareness, a realization that maybe he didn't value what he had, a sense that something within him is calling out for healing. And from that small flicker grows a deeper desire to understand himself, to feel again, to stop running from his own heart. As days pass, he might begin to reflect in ways he never did before. He might remember her words, her softness, the way she saw through him without judgment. He might feel the weight of what he once resisted. And slowly, almost quietly, his soul begins to move, not toward her directly, but inward. He may not be ready to speak it aloud, but he is beginning to change. The obsession he once felt, the longing, the urgency, it begins to shift. It becomes less about possessing her and more about reconnecting with the part of himself that could meet her with truth and vulnerability. He starts to notice his own patterns. He becomes more aware of how he avoids emotion, how he guards his heart, how he fears closeness, and he begins to question if that version of himself still serves him. He may begin to open spiritually, to read, to explore, to sit in quiet reflection. Not because she asks, but because something deeper within urges him forward. This is where his transformation begins. His growth is not loud, it's not immediate, it's not even linear, but it is real. And it starts because she let go, not to hurt him, but to return to herself. And in doing so, she gave him the space to rise, not for her approval, but for his own soul's evolution. Union doesn't start when both people are ready to hold hands. It begins when both are ready to hold themselves fully. For the masculine, this is the path toward that readiness. Facing his reflection, reclaiming his heart, and finding the courage to meet her as an equal, not from need, but from love. The divine feminine carries a depth of emotion that is both a blessing and a responsibility. She often feels everything more deeply. She knows love not just as a feeling, but as a living presence in her body. And because of this, letting go of her twin flame, even temporarily, can feel like cutting her own heart in two. But letting go is not rejection. It is not abandonment. It is an act of sacred courage. When the feminine chooses to become unavailable, it is not because she has stopped loving. It is because she has started loving herself more deeply. She recognizes that constantly giving her energy, her time, and her presence to someone who is not ready to receive it is no longer in alignment with her soul. She begins to see that love, in its highest form, is not about staying where she is unseen. It is about rising where she can be fully herself. This choice is difficult. There will be moments of doubt, nights where tears come without warning, days where old memories surface and the ache of his absence grows heavy. But even through the pain, something within her begins to bloom, a sense of peace that was never found in his presence, only in her own. As she steps into this new space, her energy becomes sacred again. No longer scattered, no longer seeking, no longer desperate to be chosen. She no longer chases. She no longer waits. She begins to live. She invests in herself. She explores her passions. She deepens her spiritual practice. She surrounds herself with softness, with strength, with people and places that reflect her growth. She starts to build a life she doesn't need to escape from, a life that is hers regardless of whether he returns. And this is not giving up on love. It is choosing to love herself first. It is choosing truth over fantasy, alignment over attachment. As she becomes more rooted in her own light, her frequency changes. She no longer vibrates from lack or longing. She vibrates from abundance. She begins to see that the universe is not punishing her. It is guiding her. The doors that close are not cruel. They are compassionate. They protect her from shrinking and redirect her toward rising. The masculine may feel her shift. He may come forward. He may remain distant. But none of that changes her path, because she is no longer measuring her worth by his actions. She has stopped tying her healing to his return. She now understands that real love will never require her to betray herself. Moving forward, her focus becomes clear. She stays loyal to her intuition. She honors her needs. She speaks her truth. She allows space for joy without guilt. She holds her own hand through uncertainty. She becomes the very love she used to beg for. And if the day comes when he returns, not out of longing, but out of wholeness, she will meet him not as a wounded woman, but as a powerful being who knows her value. And if that day never comes, she will still rise. She will still flourish. She will still be complete. This is what it means to walk as the divine feminine, to stop clinging and start creating, to stop waiting and start living, to stop asking and start becoming. Stay unavailable to chaos. Stay unavailable to what drains you. Stay unavailable to false versions of love. And stay deeply, wildly, fully available to yourself. Because in that choice, you are not just healing. You are becoming the embodiment of the love your soul has always longed for. And in that light, nothing, absolutely nothing, is ever lost, only transformed.